Good morning, and welcome to part 12 of our study of the Book of Galatians. Now, up to this point, Paul has been telling the churches of Galatia that they were no longer under the law if they accepted Christ as their Savior and recognized his crucifixion and resurrection. If full belief in this is really all that was needed to make one right with God. So about the law, then the law was there as a means to show what we should not do, to show us what we should not do, but did not tell us what we should do. And now he's getting into a part of the book in chapter 5, the second part of chapter 5, where he tries to explain this. See, the law was there to give us a boundary, to show us where we should not transgress, where we should not go. And it is said that if you transgress the law, even any part of the law at any time, you sin, and the wages of sin is death. This is God's rule throughout the Bible. And therefore, he's saying you are no longer now under the law. So does that mean that you have no longer any boundaries, no longer any restrictions as to what you can do? And this is what he's saying in verse 13. For you brethren, he's calling them brethren now, he called them fools before. He's calling them brethren, have been called to liberty, liberty in Christ, liberty without the boundaries or the necessity to actually follow the law. So you've been called to liberty, only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh. And this is what he's getting at. Just because we have no more restrictions as far as the law is concerned, does not mean we can use that freedom as a means to do what we want to do. It says in Romans chapter 6, verse 1, what shall we say then? Shall we continue to sin that grace may abound? Certainly not. In other words, the freedom from the law, the liberty that Christ has given us, does not give us the freedom to do whatever we want to do. It gives us boundaries again by which we should act, but these boundaries are internal. Our conscience, if you want to use that word. These boundaries are internal and not on a written law. And it says, do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. This is the second part of the commandment that God gave to his disciples. When he said, I give you a new commandment. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And this is what he's saying. This fulfills all the part of the law. This second part of this new commandment fulfills all the part of the law that was covered by the interpersonal commandments given to Moses on the Mount. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But then it says, if you bite and devour one another, beware lest you be consumed by one another. So the object of this is not to follow written rules and regulations, but to know on a law written in your heart what you need to do. And to do that, it doesn't give you liberty to do anything you want, but there are boundaries which your own conscience and own internal dealings with the Holy Spirit tell you. And he says, this is what you do. You love one another. But unfortunately, many people, even Christians, start backbiting, start getting into little arguments and conflicts over things that happen externally or internally in the church. And as a result of this, they end up with backbitings, they end up with arguments, disagreements, conflicts, which should not be allowed to happen or should not actually start. But he says, beware this doesn't happen. Beware your idea of love dissipates into conflict, into arguments, into disagreements. Because if this happens, if you bite and devour one another, by becoming disagreeable with one another, then you actually end up hurting each other. You end up devouring, being consumed by one another. And this is often what leads to problems which spreads then throughout the whole community. Because this disagreement, or because this argument is allowed to proceed. He says, beware this does not happen, because then you end up consuming one another. Disagreements will occur, differences of opinions will occur, but let it not be allowed to become serious. Talk them out. Confer with each other. Compromise. Understand that everybody has little differences of opinion, even though the basic doctrine may be held by everyone. Don't let those minor difficulties, those minor differences of opinion, cause people to consume or devour or to really destroy each other. So then he says, I say, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. What he's meaning is you will not commit the sin that men and women are continually apt to do through our own lusts, through our own desires, through our own pride. Do not fulfill the lust of the flesh. And this is really outlined primarily in Romans chapter 8. In the first part of chapter 8, I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but it says here in verse 8, because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, now nor indeed can be. So then those who are in the flesh cannot please God. But if you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of God dwells in you, but you, he's talking to Christians, are supposed to apparent Christians, but you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of God dwells in you. So this is what he's saying here in this verse in Galatians chapter 5. If you walk in the Spirit, if the Spirit of God is in you and you walk in the Spirit, then you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit. The desires of man, the earthly desires of man, for wealth, for power, for prestige, for getting what I can for myself. The earthly lusts of man do not go along with that of the Spirit. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are not compatible. These are not really compatible. And as a result of that, it's like mixing fire and water. One is contrary to the other, so that you do not do the things you wish. Paul in Romans admitted this himself when he said that he was more apt to fall into the desires of the flesh if he was not careful. We all have that desire. It's natural. It's born in man, it's born in woman to have their own natural desires satisfied, sometimes in ways which are not correct. But this is what he's saying. If the Spirit dwells within you, then you do not lust after the things of the flesh in the same way. And these are contrary to each other, so that you do not do the things that you wish. You wish to do the things of the flesh, but because of the Spirit in you, you tend not to do them. You tend to restrain yourself. If you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the laws that cause you to be condemned. You are not condemned by the law because you don't do the thing that the law prevents. Now he lists these things. He lists what the flesh often desires. And I'm not going to go into all the details, all the definitions, because most people know what these are. He said the works of the flesh are evident. We see it every day. You listen to the news, you read the newspaper, sometimes just walking down the street, you see some of these some of these works of the flesh in action. Adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like. These are really some of the works of the flesh, and we know this from experience, from reading newspapers, from reading books, from watching television. All of these things are evident in everyday life. Many of which you may have witnessed. We all witness some of them. Others we don't, but we all know they exist, because these always amplify and extenuate and show what the flesh really wants. It's the self-satisfaction, the self-preservation. It's a me thing. It's a me thing. These are evidences of that. Now, it says that these are really divided into three. There are what's called sensual sins, the first two or three, the sensual sins, adultery, fornication. There are what's called spiritual sins and social sins. They're all involved in these lists that Paul has given us. These says, of which I tell you beforehand. There's the like of these, this is not a complete list. There's a like of this, of which I tell you before, and just as I also told you in time past, because this is not the first time he's spoken to the Galatian church, and he's telling us as well. As I told you in time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Now, he's not saying those who practiced those in the past but have repented and have come to Christ. That's different. They're as much an inheritance as anyone else. But those who continue to do these things, those who continue to practice the works of the flesh, will never inherit the kingdom of God. But then he goes on to tell you the fruit of the Spirit is love, it's joy, it's peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Now, these are the works of the Spirit. And the first one listed is love. It says in the Bible that God is love. Now, there are other religions who worship other deities, or supposed deities, but one of the facts of most of these other gods, love is not part of their persona. But the first measure in Christianity, the first work of the Spirit in Christianity is love. And God himself is love. He says, fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. This is the work of the Spirit. And against these, there is no law. There is no law preventing any of these, as there are laws preventing the others. Now, you may ask, there are many people who are loving, who are gentle, who are kind, who are full of joy. Are they in the same category as people who follow Christ? And this is a question I really am not qualified to answer. But the commandment which God says to love one another, to love your neighbor as yourself, is only part of the commandment. Because he said the first part is to love your God. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And people have to consider if they're complying with both parts of this commandment. He says there's no law against the fruit of the Spirit. And those who are Christ's have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Christ was crucified on a cross to carry our sins away. What he's saying really is that if you are in the Spirit, if you walk in the Spirit, then you have crucified, you have put your old flesh up on the cross with Christ, and he has taken it away. So we are crucified with his passions and desires. We are crucified with Christ for the flesh. If we live in the Spirit, then if we are truly in the Spirit, let us walk in the Spirit. Let us demonstrate what we say we do. Let us demonstrate what we say we believe. Let us walk. If we're going to talk the talk, then walk the walk. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another along the way. In other words, if we're going to talk the talk, we're going to walk the walk. Let us not do so in a way that lets us become self-centered, conceited, and therefore irritating each other, irritating others. Let us do it in a way which is gentle, which is done in a reasonable way, but let us walk the walk and show what Christianity is really about. So this is what Paul is saying. If you dispense with the law that was given, the laws which show transgression, which show no one can really follow completely, if you dispense with that and have the liberty under Christ, it doesn't give you the license to do anything you want. If you're going to be in the Spirit and walk in the Spirit and show the attributes which walking in the Spirit gives you. If you're not doing that, then you're probably still living in the works of the flesh, which are listed here, and which can still condemn you. Because if you're still walking in those, it says, Paul says, you will not inherit the kingdom of God. So he's telling the Galatians there's two aspects to this. Freedom from the law does not give you a license to do anything you want, but it gives you only the liberty to realize what's in your heart, what the Spirit tells you, and you will understand inherently what is right to do in most cases. No one is perfect. No one continues to be perfect, but it gives you an idea of the way to go, the way to proceed, and to understand what the works of the Spirit are in this day and age. So this concludes chapter 5. We'll get on to chapter 6 next week in lesson 13. So I hope you'll join me for that. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.